Hello, thank you for joining me today for our 5-minute Bible study. Today we continue in the book of Colossians. We are in chapter 2, and today we're going to look at verse 13, which starts a little subsection here in the full section of 8 through 15. So as always, go ahead and read 8 through 15 so you get the full context, but we're going to start this little section that goes from 13 to 15. 8 through 12 told us a lot about how God used Christ and what he did through Christ, and in verses 13 through 15, we're going to see what that means to us. What are the benefits of what God did? So we're going to get a chance to look at that starting today in verse 13, which says this. When you were dead in your transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us of all our transgressions. So, as I said, we're starting a little new section here, but as you'll notice, there's still a lot of conversation of the same exact kind of wording that we just heard back in verses 8 through 12. So there's more conversations about being raised from the dead and being uncircumcised. So just like in verses 11, 12, those things are spiritual. They're illustrations that Paul's using. Here, same thing. So let's take a look and see what it means. So if he says, when you were dead, again, he's not speaking about physical death, obviously. He's speaking about spiritual death. And he says, so when you were spiritually dead in your transgressions. Transgressions are sins. So when we have sins, we are dead spiritually. And that's where we are. No doubt about it. Thank God for verses 8 through 12, which tells us what God did through Christ. And we'll see it again now. But before that, back before that, and that's what Paul's saying, when you were dead in your transgressions. So people who haven't received Christ yet, they're dead in their transgressions. They've sinned, and so spiritually they're dead. They need something to happen to bring them spiritually alive again. We'll see that in a second. So we all were at one point spiritually dead. We all transgress. And a transgression is a sin, but it's a very specific sin. It's a sin that says, I'm going against the law on purpose. I'm purposely doing the wrong thing. We know we do that all the time, don't we? We transgress God's laws all the time. We know we're not supposed to be doing something, but we do it anyway. That's a transgression. And the second we disobey God, it's what Adam did. When the second we disobey God, we have the wrath of God upon us. We need something to get us alive again. And so Paul tells us, back in the day, when we were dead in our transgressions, he says, and we were dead in the uncircumcision of our flesh. And that's going back and pointing back. Remember back in verse 11, Paul talks about how we have the circumcision that was made without hands that removed our body of flesh, and it was a circumcision of Christ. In other words, Christ circumcised us by removing that body of flesh. And remember, that body of flesh was our sins, our transgressions, all those things that keep us from God. So Christ, in his the circumcision of Christ, we recognize was the death of Christ on the cross. So through the death of Christ on the cross, the sin of the body of our flesh is removed from us. We are circumcised from that without hands. And that's what Paul's saying. Before that, before we were circumcised, we were uncircumcised in our flesh. So we still had our sins. So we were dead in our transgressions. We were uncircumcised. They were still with us. They hadn't been taken away from us in our flesh. He made you alive. Notice, this isn't something you can do. It's not something we can do. God does it. He makes us alive. If we try to do good things to make up for our sinfulness, that body of flesh that's with us, that body of flesh is still there. It never goes away. We could try to clean that body of flesh, but it's still there. We need it to be circumcised from us, taken it away. And the only one who can do that is God. And so he made you alive together with him, together with Christ. So remember previously in 11 and 12, we died with Christ, we raised with Christ. So this has been done together with Christ, having forgiven all our transgressions. So when we receive Christ, when we receive the work he did on the cross, all our transgressions are forgiven. This is a picture of God's grace. There's nothing we could do. He did it. We couldn't do anything. But he removed that from us, even though we couldn't do it. So even though we want to try to be good people, we can't be. It doesn't matter what we do. The only way we can get this cleaned is of God doing it, and he has done it. He's shown us his mercy and grace by removing that from us. And so now all our transgressions are forgiven. Even though they were against God, we knew what we were doing, he has forgiven them. So that's what verse 13 is telling us. What a great benefit of everything that we learned back in verse 8 through 12. We are so blessed to know that by receiving Christ, God has done this for us, and we have our transgressions removed from us. So thanks for joining me today. That takes care of verse 13. Join us again tomorrow as we go into verse 14. And if you have any questions, comments, thoughts at all, go ahead and put those in the comments section below. And until I get a chance to talk to you again tomorrow, have a wonderful day, and God bless you.